of the Board of Behavioral Sciences, meeting on November 30th, 2018 at the Hyatt Regency Orange County, 11999 Harbor Boulevard, Plaza Terrace, Garden Grove, California, 92840. And with that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And Christina, can we establish a quorum, please?
Good morning. Gabriel Lamb.
Here.
Deborah Brown.
Here.
Jonathan Maddox.
Here.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Here.
Vicka Stout.
Here.
Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Here.
Betty Conley.
Here.
Christina Wong. Here. Dr. Leah Brew.
Here.
Alex Kim.
Here.
For the record, Max Disposti is absent. We have a quorum.
So as we get started with introductions, I just want to remind everyone that we can only have four mics will work at one time. So after you've finished speaking, turn your mic off, and that should allow everybody to weigh in. So with that, why don't we start with you, Gabriel, with introductions? Oh, I'm sorry, down with Christy. We have everyone here today, that's right.
Hi, Christy Berger, Legislative Analyst for the Board.
Roseanne Helms, Legislative Analyst for the Board.
Good morning, Gabriel Lam, LCSW member.
Deborah Brown, Public Member.
Jonathan Maddox, MFT member.
Peter Chu, public member.
Vicka Stout, MFT Member.
Christine Whitlisbach, public member.
Kim Matson, Executive Officer.
Betty Conley, LEP member.
Sabina Knight, legal counsel.
Christina Wong, LCSW member.
Leah Brew, LPCC member.
Alexander Kim, public member.
Steve Sodergren, Assistant Executive Officer of the Board.
With that, we'll move to our first item, which is the consent calendar. Did we have board meeting minutes from August 15th, 2018? Were there any corrections to those minutes? Anyone have corrections?
I did have some corrections and provided them to Christina Kitamura, and she has them.
Okay.
Yes, I noted several typographical errors. Those corrections were forwarded to me, and I'll make those amendments back at the office.
And then we had a September 12th, 2018 board meeting minutes. Any
My
corrections
comment
on those?
applies to all the typographical errors that were
Okay.
contained in all three.
And then we want to approve as well the October 19th board meeting minutes. So with that, do we have a motion to approve?
Sorry. I'll second.
Move to approve the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Christina?
Okay, vote. Gabriel Lamb. Aye. Deborah Brown. Aye. Jonathan Maddox.
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu.
Aye.
Vicka Stout.
Aye.
Dr. Christine Whitlisbach.
Yes.
Betty Conley.
Yes.
Christina Wong.
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew.
Yes.
Alex Kim.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Moving on to board member activities, would any of the board members like to talk about any of the outreach activities, any meetings, anything of interest? Deborah?
I would just like to do a little bit of a shout out to Fresno Mental Health. The County of Mental Health came and spoke to my class, and they're doing a wellness program. This is so exciting to me because I was unaware of it. But the San Joaquin Valley, and they're putting, their goal is a 5-year goal to put in a mental therapist in every single school in the San Joaquin Valley. Fresno Unified, being the 5th largest school district in the state of California, is monumental. So they're going to start off down in Sanger, and they're moving their way up through to Fresno, et cetera, et cetera. Right now, this is what I want to put out there. They are looking for 252 therapists by December 31st of this year. And going forward, they're going to be looking for hundreds and hundreds more to get one of therapists in every single school. So I'd like to just give a shout out to that, and I think that, this is something this board has talked about over and over, and I think this is just really encouraging news that hopefully the whole San Joaquin Valley will be saturated with therapists to help out the students on campus. So I just wanted to say that. And I've passed that information on to Ms. Mattson, and she's going to be in contact with her to make sure that we all work and team together. So that's what I wanted to say. That's exciting. That's a lot of jobs.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay. So moving on, we're going to welcome the Deputy Director, Chris Castrillo, from the Department of Consumer Affairs. Is here to, he's not here yet? They're not here yet. They're not here yet. Well, then why don't we move on to the Executive Officer's report, and we'll come back to the DCA staff.
Okay, so, excuse my voice, and we'll go as long as we can. So for our budget, the coming year, we have an $11.5 million budget for fiscal year 18-19, or 18-19. And as we've previously reported to you, DCA transitioned into Fiscal, as did several other agencies, and this is the new accounting system for the state of California. In terms of reports, so our expenditures at this time is based on the information that we have access to and we track within the office. Clearly, if you look at the budget expenditure report, it reports zero allocation for salaries, and I can assure you that everybody's been getting paid since July. So, our expenses don't really change all that much, so, we're careful in the office about our expenditures right now, especially with the upcoming move, and we'll just continue to monitor it, and as those reports become available, we'll share them with you. The general fund, I'm happy to share that the last payment of our $12.3 million loan to the general fund is reflected in this year's budget, and it's supposed to be, it's part of our 18-19 budget, so we're excited about that. So we will be square at the end of this year. And currently, our fund condition is reflecting a 5.3-month reserve. And I'm happy to answer any questions about the budget report that you may have.
So Kim, when do we expect it? Because, the important part, for the revenue. So.
Mm-hmm. So for us, we're projecting a budget deficit in, 2021, which is the primary reason we're doing the fee audit. Moving on to our operations report, you have your first quarter statistics. In our licensing program, there was a mathematical error. The AMFT registrations increased by 32%. So with that correction, we had a 31% overall increase in application volumes last quarter. And we began tracking the subsequent number applications. These are individuals who have a first registration with us, but find a need to have a second or third registration. And we thought it might be some good data to start tracking, so we started tracking that. You'll notice that we got 200 AMFT subsequent registrations, 161 social work subsequent registrations, and clinical counselor registrations. Subsequently, we got 3. So, and we'll provide that to you monthly on an ongoing basis. Overall, our processing times for applications has decreased, and I can share that staff right now is working primarily on applications that were received late November, or mid-November, so we're on time. We issued nearly 1,700 new licenses last quarter, and as of November 1st, we had over 115,000 licensees and registrants, so we continue to grow. And again, I keep looking at New York social work population, and they report as July 1st, almost 28,000 licensees, social workers, clinical social workers, and currently we have just over 28,000. So we're running neck and neck with them. So the social work population in California is exploding. So that's nice to see. We issued a little over 5,500 examinations last quarter, and the pass rates for the first-time takers as well as the overall pass rates are included. We've also included the pass rates by school in your packet for your review. And they're broken out by type of exam, so you can see the pass rates for law and ethics as well as the clinical. And I will share with you that our clinical out-of-state pass rates align very well with the national pass rates when we use those national exams, so it's very similar. So last October, our Office of Professional Examination Services initiated the work to conduct an occupational analysis for the LPCC profession. Across the country, this is referred to as a practice exam analysis. We use occupational analysis, but essentially the analysis is to survey the lay of the land, see what practice looks like in California, so that from that survey response, then we build the task and knowledge statements that serve as the foundation for our exam. So that work has been completed. They completed it in June of 2018. Included in your packet is the full report with the methodology that they used to conduct the survey and how they arrived at the task and knowledge statements. That is sort of the blueprint or the roadmap for our exam, and that's what they'll use in our examination development workshops to develop the law and ethics examination. It's also going to serve as, I wouldn't say a foundation, but sort of a guideline for OPES to use when they evaluate the national clinical exam. And I initiated that process last month. And so NBCCC has been notified that we will be conducting a review of the National Clinical Mental Health Counselor examination. So that's underway. Any questions? Yes.
I just want to note that looking at the population that was evaluated, the majority of the people, 95% of them, were dually licensed, and their identity wasn't as a counselor, so it's hard to understand if that's really what LPCCs are doing or what MFTs who got the second, or psychologists who got the grandparenting into the field. So as long as we're aware of that.
Exactly, and I'll share that with OPES. And with respect to the National MFT exam, we reported that we thought that evaluation would initiate this year. In speaking with OPES, their preference is to wait until we do our occupational analysis for MFT in California. That project has been initiated, so I anticipate that probably late 2019 we'll start talking with the National Association that delivers the MFT exam about their exam. I can share with you that the conference that I went to for AMFTRB, where the exam was discussed, they do develop it in the very same manner that we do. However, their questions are not, based on the comments, the questions that they develop do not seem to be at the same high cognitive critical thinking level that we develop our questions. So that's something that I would want to look at carefully before we opt to go on a national exam. If we don't go to a national exam, just this last week I sent, with the assistance of OPES and Dr. Tracy Montez, I sent some detailed information about our examination here that we develop in California, and so that could be shared with other states so that they could consider using or accepting that exam in a reciprocity. So, and that seems to be moving forward. There seems to be some willingness to accept our exam if in our portability plan, we acknowledge and accept the national exam. I see that as being a real positive for all of us. So, any questions?
Just a little comment. So Kim, currently Oregon already accepts the California the clinical exam, right?
Right.
And then is Oregon the only state?
No, and I'll speak to that a little bit later.
Okay, perfect.
So our admin program, this is the boots on the ground department. We received over 10,000 applications last quarter. It's an 8% increase since the fourth quarter. So, you know, we love our paper. We love our paper. It keeps coming. A change that we made last quarter was that effective October 1st, we revised the renewal notification process. Now, when our renewal notices go out, it does not include the paper coupon, but it does include instructions to renew online. The primary reason for this is that even with the paper renewals, we are still seeing deficient applications. And if you renew online, you can't be renewed until you complete the process in its entirety. So two things, it's an effort to go green. The Board of Registered Nursing did it, I think, about 6 or 8 months ago, and they're reporting a really high level of success and not a lot of pushback, which is nice. And so as a result of that, knowing that someone can renew online, it's complete, and you get your new expiration date immediately after the process is completed, it seems to be a very efficient way to go in terms of licensing renewal.
Okay.
Yes.
Just to be clear, we are still sending out paper notices, letting
Yes.
people know that their licenses are...
Absolutely.
Okay.
As long as they maintain a valid address with us, then they'll get the notice.
Okay.
So, I mean, and I think that effort really reflects the online renewal participation jumped to 82%. So it's very good. What it does is it really decreases the work that central cashiering and DCA has to do, as well as in-house renewals. So it's a very positive move. And I want to thank Steve Sodergren for pushing that through. Timeout. In our enforcement program, we received 432 consumer complaints, 421 criminal conviction notifications. We closed almost 800 cases. We referred 48 cases to the AG office for formal discipline. We filed 29 accusations and 16 statement of issues, and we concluded 41 final citations last quarter. It's really exciting to report the average number of days for formal discipline now. We are currently in the last quarter, 529 days. DCA's performance measure is 540 days. So we're finally getting there. So I think the additional staff in our office and in the AG's office is really helping that along. And the average number of days that we have a case with the AG, and that time frame is from when we send it until we get it back, is 346 days. So they're getting those done in less than a year, which is nice. Average number of days to complete all investigations at the board is 93. We had a vacancy in our licensing unit, and so we reassigned our CE analyst to assist with that workload. So we did not conduct any CE audits this quarter, but we'll have a report for you at the next board meeting. Our outreach program continues to be really robust. We are very engaged with the MFT consortium meetings. They meet on a quarterly basis, and we provide them all the updates on what the board is doing, law changes, activities, and it's a really good opportunity for us to hear from the educators and the licensees about the concerns or issues or emerging trends that we see in their profession. I recently reached out again to the consortium to obtain their meeting date so that we can ensure that staff is able to participate. And the participation there is usually by phone, unless we're in the area. And it's worked out very well, and the feedback that we get from the consortium groups is very, very positive. I'm happy to report I was approved to attend 2 national meetings, and I attended the MBCC national meeting and the AMFT national meeting. At the MBCC meeting, the key topics at both national meetings it's license portability and telehealth regulations, two of the issues that we're currently looking at. I presented our framework for the license portability to the MBCC group, and it was extremely well received. I was very happy about it. The other thing that was very interesting about the MBCC meeting is that they, along with the American Association of State Counseling Boards and other entities, have developed their own portability plan. And that's the NCLEP, that proposal that's included in your packet. So following their proposal, I provided some feedback. Essentially, their proposal for portability, if it were to be adopted, would exclude California LPCCs. Because we can't meet 2 of the criteria. The first criteria is that you have to be licensed since 2008. Well, our program didn't begin until 2010. The other criteria that would get you the fast track to portability in another state would be that you had to graduate from a KCREP program. And KCREP is the accrediting body, very similar to the social work education accreditation, where they accredit the program. 2 issues with that. Since our program here in California for LPCCs is brand new, many of the schools have not had time to obtain that accreditation. However, that being said, we modeled our educational requirements after that program. One other issue that was brought to my attention by another state that I was unaware of, if the LPCC program is housed in the psychology department, you cannot obtain KCREP accreditation. So those 2 items alone will exclude California LPCCs. My comments were heard and received, and I am having a meeting with NBCC and representatives from the American Association of State Counseling Boards about our proposal so that they can revise their proposals so that it will include California LPCCs. So I was very happy to be at that meeting. Otherwise, I believe that proposal would have been adopted.
Yeah, thank you so much for attending that. Right now, there are 9 KCREP accredited institutions in California. Almost, I think all but one are Cal States. But it is growing, and I do know a lot of private institutions are seeking it because they're calling me and asking me for advice on that. So I'm so glad you took action with that. The other thing that seemed random, did they give an idea about why 2008? Is it something about licensed 10 years? Is that word? Because, you know, in 15 years from now, that'll seem like a weird date.
Yeah.
Rather than saying how many years they were licensed, did they give some logic?
They didn't give any background or rationale for the determination of that date. That was, you know, sort of my point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Random.
So,
Okay, thank you.
The attendance at the AMFTRB annual meeting, which is the Marriage and Family Therapist entity that offers the national exam, conversations were very similar about license portability and telehealth. All the states are struggling with it. Again, I presented our proposal, and again, it was very well received. And our proposal really is modeled after the AMFTRB's proposal for license portability. I'm pleased to tell you, to answer Christina's earlier question, that there are 7 states in addition to Oregon that now recognize the California LMFT clinical exam for portability purposes. I think what struck me about that meeting is that very few states are reporting any kind of progress with license portability on the MFT side. Primarily, the reluctance seems to be opening up their laws. I think their laws and the way they revise them is very different than how we work. And so there's a lot of hesitancy about that.
I think one of the other challenges is a lot of states require that they are accredited by, what is it? Yeah.
COAMFTE?
COAMFTE,
Yeah.
COAMFTE, yeah. So that's written in their law, that it's an accredited program, and we don't have that many in California.
Right. So myself and the Oklahoma executive officer really described how we went about developing our portability language, how to involve the stakeholders, how to get those answers and those issues taken care of before the bill hits. And that seemed to, that was well received, and I would say that some states showed a little more interest in moving forward with portability. I suspect that when our bill is signed, I'm thinking positively, it's going to start a domino effect, especially with the MFT licensees across the state. So that is the national exam attendance reports. Yes.
Do you want to mention this? So wasn't there a social work meeting?
I was not approved to attend that.
You weren't approved to attend that? No. Is there anything that we can do to help get your, I mean, obviously this is really critical, particularly with portability, and I know that's an issue in social work as well. And if we don't have a voice in that, then the other states are going to move on doing their own thing without us, so.
Right. I think, because I submitted the request twice. The meeting was held in San Antonio, Texas. Texas has unfriendly laws to alternative lifestyles, shall we say. And I suspect that's the reason I was not approved to attend. It was interesting, though, that, North Carolina has similar laws, and I was able to go back last year. So I don't know. I'm still in contact and work very closely with Mary Jo Monahan, the executive director of ASWB, providing input about our portability process. They have our language. I've been asked for it, so I did send it. And we're just going to I'll just keep trying. Next year's meeting is in Orlando, Florida, and I'm hopeful I'll be approved to attend. I don't know if anything. It's unfortunate because ASWB fully funds my trip if I go. It's at no cost to the state.
I just want to speak on behalf of, being the past attendee for the ASWB meeting, and it's extremely helpful to bring the California voice on the table. And they always look at California being, one of the biggest states, and, and we're more, our policy actually really influence, the statewide. And they look to us kind of like a model or the peer, or kind of like a little pioneer too, to a certain extent, for our policies. So I think it's really critical for the voice being brought back to, to the ASWB meeting, and especially, we have such, huge growth of the social worker numbers. So I just really encourage, I just want to stay in the record that, from the LCSW point of view, it's really critical, for our representation, being in the ASWB meeting. So I really encourage, whoever, up, at the hierarchy, be able to approve that.
Right. I will share that they did approve me to go back in the spring to their education meetings, so I will be there, so that'll be helpful. So we'll just I'll keep working on it and submitting it, and, hopefully. I mean, you're right, Christina, it's critical. If we're going to use national exams, we need to be there at the table, because otherwise we're going to end up with decisions being made without our voice. And if we're either one or two in the state in terms of social work, or in the nation of social work populations, it's critical that our voice is heard. As you see with the NBCC, had I not been there, that would have passed, and they would have adopted a proposal that would exclude California LPCCs from their portability plan. So you never know what comes up, and it's critical that you're there.
I think also explaining to the agents, to ASWB about, some of the restriction and the sensitivity about the location. I think that's another,
Yes, and they're
definitely
aware of it.
another important angle.
Yeah, I think for these organizations, they set those meeting dates so far, they're at least 2 years or a year and a half in advance. So shifting gears is tough.
Right, shifting gears is tough, but, they're still planning now for something 2 or 3 years in the future. And so I don't see California changing in that regard, their policy on that. So, if we could have a voice in our
Yeah.
preference, if they want us there. I know we're just one of many states, but
Well, they do, in ASWB in particular, they like that I attend, primarily because we develop our own exam. So when you go into a closed session after you sign the confidentiality agreement, and then they start talking about the exam development, I am the only other individual in the room that understands how exams are developed. And the same questions that we hear are there, and I'm able to offer an alternative viewpoint, and that not only supports the work of ASWB, but really it helps to educate all the other attendees.
so are they aware of the reason and why you could
Yes,
not
they
attend?
are.
Okay.
They are. They are. And they're sorry I could not be there.
Kim, I had a question. Alexander Kim, public member. I'm pretty active with the USC School of Social Work as a fellow there. And is there any way that letters could be written to the governor's office about the importance of the board representation to the various conferences like the social work conference? So
I'd be willing to try that, yeah. We have not done that to date. But yeah, I think that might be very helpful if this continues to come up. Thank you.
There's a lot of students there, so that'd be a lot of letters to some legislators.
Exactly. And I appreciate your support. I think the work that we're doing here in California is critical to what's going to happen nationwide. We hold 2 professions. We have the highest population in MFTs and social workers, and our LPCC population already exceeds more than half of the states in the nation. And so if we still want those exams to be relevant for licensure, and if we still want to promote the portability that even at the federal level that it seems to be desired, it's critical that we go. So moving on, we're still waiting for approval of our plans for the board move. I think the recent fires derailed, and understandably so, some of the approvals of our floor plan. Steve, can I punt the fee audit to you since you're, yeah, thank you.
So we kicked off. We're working with CPS Consulting, Chris Atkins and Karen Connell. We've been working with Don Herrera, our budget staff member. So currently, right now, they're in the process of beginning to draft the actual report. And I'm hoping that the report we will be presenting, I believe, at the next board meeting, which I believe we have January, February. Yeah. So February, we'll be able to present that. And that's all I got.
Any questions about the operation report? Okay.
Good morning, Ben Caldwell, AMFT. The pass rates on the California MFT clinical exam seem to be trending back down to close to where they were at the beginning of 2017. That was a big problem at the time. I know that you all had OPES come in and talk about, in their view, what was happening. Externally, we didn't ever get much of an explanation for that. I understand there are some things that you have to do in closed session related to exams. At the November 2nd meeting last year, Steve, you had promised to make available an anonymized data set of clinical examinees so that researchers, including me, but not limited to me certainly, could take a look at that data and see what correlates might emerge in terms of passing or not passing on that exam. I have, in the past year, repeated that request 10 times by email, and we still do not have that data. It is particularly concerning in light of the new data that seems to suggest we are headed back in that direction. It does not pass the smell test that 38% of MFT clinical examinees would be a danger to the public if allowed to enter into private practice. We need to know what's happening with that exam. Anything you can do to that end is going to be much appreciated. Thank you.
I can share with you that part of the information I received at the National MFT Conference was about their exam. And I had to smile to myself when they reported that they had a significant drop once they went in with a new exam version based on the new occupational analysis. And the fact that they started writing questions at a more critical thinking level. The pass rate, if I recall correctly, was 46%. So, we're happy to work with you, Ben, on the data, but in terms of, is it a legally defensible, valid exam? It absolutely is. And I found it interesting to see that the national exam has the same struggles, issues, concerns that have been expressed here. But yet the questions are developed in a manner to promote critical thinking, and the questions have to tie back to the exam plan. So I don't know if, students are not aware that they have to use a critical thinking, or is it just something, I don't know. There could be a lot of different reasons.
Betty.
Christine?
I don't want to put you on the spot, Steve, but is there a reason why we can't give the information that they're asking for? What's the delay?
Polling data is, first of all, that's timely, and then actually presenting that out to the public in a manner that's usable is very timely.
Time consuming, you mean?
Time consuming.
Okay.
Timely.
Gotcha.
Time
Okay,
consuming. It'd be great if we had an expert, like somebody to work in the board like we used to have, to actually work on that data and such. But part about pulling the data too with the new system, the transfer to Breeze, to get the actual real good data, you're going to have to take some time to actually clean it up.
Okay. So are you saying that like right now, it's probably not something that's going to happen?
To be honest with you, actually, we did have discussions, a side discussion with OPES, and we're thinking of, we were talking about the possibility of seeing if we can get some assistance with that, so.
Okay, thank you.
But, yeah, not trying to ignore you, it's just, it's really time consuming, so.
I gotcha.
Leah?
So there seems like there's something a little bit backwards about this process that needs to be fixed. So the occupational analysis goes out and finds out what people are doing, and then they change the test. But they don't tell the programs who are preparing the students what's changed in the field. So then we're teaching what we've always been teaching based on what we know. And yes, some people practice, but many professors are in private practice. And the agencies are so remarkably diverse, we don't have the same kind of aggregate data that you could get statewide. And then there's also regional things, but hopefully you account for that. So I'm just thinking, if there's some major seismic shift that happens, the programs don't know. And then there's also this issue that, so you change the test now, even if you tell me now that, oh, I need to start talking about this in a new way, then you've already changed the test. So my people who are taking the test now were in their grad program 3 years ago.
We'll share that with OPES and see what they have to say about that, because that's an interesting point.
Any further public comment before moving on?
Good morning, everybody. Kenneth Edwards, California Association for LPCC. I wanted to say thank you, first of all, Kim, for advocating for us at the NBCC meeting. That was kind of warmed my heart. And I wanted to echo Dr. Brew's comments with, it's a very arbitrary date for 2008. I mean, considering where we are as a country in LPCCs. So whatever we can do as CalPIC, please reach out and we'll jump in as well. Thank you.
I will, thank you. Yeah, I'll do that, and then if you want to go to Chris Castrelli, or you want to, this is a quick report. so I can-
We'll go ahead and move on to the next report, which is an update on the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee, and then we'll move to Deputy Director Castrillo.
So the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee held its third meeting in October. This committee was reestablished to take a look at Uniform Standard 4 in our disciplinary guidelines, specifically the frequency of biological fluid testing and such. So we received a lot of great information. I really have to applaud the staff for the coordination committee. I mean, their research efforts have been amazing. They have found some really good information for us. So we heard from out-of-state and third-party rehabilitation programs in their drug testing frequency, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And it was really interesting to hear that there's no agreement or consensus regarding the ideal testing frequency. I'm not surprised. And at a minimum, they recommend testing should be twice a month. So that was interesting. We also heard from the panelists about 3 factors that really contribute to successful participants in a program, and it's participation in a peer support group, random testing, and a structured monitoring program. It really are 3 keys that contribute to a participant having a successful completion of the program. We talked about whether we should make any changes to the testing frequency. The testing frequency now is based at 52 with a maximum of 104 times in that first year. There are some exceptions that the uniform standards provide that could allow for testing at a less frequent basis. But at the end of the day, the committee wanted to leave everything the same. They felt like there was enough, for lack of a better word, wiggle room, discretion in the uniform standards as written, so that the boards could do what they need to do. They did discuss a proposal to another, adding an exception to testing frequency. And this request came from pharmacy. And primarily, they requested that if the individual is supervised, directly supervised more than 50% while at work, then you could test at a less frequent rate. The idea being that if they're under observation during their 7-8 hour period, and they were impaired, it would be assumed that the supervisor would observe that. So that's why they added that. So the only 2 changes that so far out of this committee is that we revised some language to allow for vacations, and this additional exception. So there will be another meeting. I just don't have another meeting date.
So the pharmacy thing, is it specific to pharmacy licensees?
Well, they requested it on behalf of their licensees. Primarily, I'm thinking about pharmacy techs who are in a pharmacy working all the time. They have a supervisor, the pharmacist in charge, the pharmacist there on site.
Yeah.
And the thought being for them, if it wouldn't apply to our licensees, we could not use this.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah. So, any questions?
So you had talked about there being, when we were doing cases the other day, that they could do hair now and
Yeah.
do more thorough analyses. So with the new testing site that we have, if they can do a longer period of time where people can't get away with things, it would seem to me reasonable to change it to a lower frequency, because at $100 a pop, that it's a lot of money, and we're not here to punish them, so we're just trying to keep safe. So
We've initiated that. One of the tests that we use now is called a PEth test. It's a blood test, and it will detect alcohol as far back as 20 days. So when and it's random, we can go in and schedule it at any time. It does not detect any drug use. We would need a hair test for that. So we are trying to use a combination of testing in a random fashion or in a follow-up situation to either confirm a low result or confirm use. So, and in using the, since we've had access to the PET test, I probably have seen 5 or 6 licensees. Their alcohol use was confirmed, and they are now at the AG's office. So,
Christine?
I know we're talking about testing licensees who are on probation.
Right.
But was there any discussion now with the legalization of marijuana, how that might be tested? And was there any?
But the way we have approached, and because there's no standards out there yet, we're going to approach an arrest for marijuana the same fashion that we approach a DUI. That makes it challenging because somebody has a legal prescription or it's legal to use or any of those. Honestly, we've not had a lot of those come across.
I don't know anything about marijuana or drug
Yeah.
testing for it, but like when you test for it, like, does it come out like alcohol? Like there's a level of use, or you just yes or no?
It's a yes or a no. And what it'll show, I know in the hair test in particular, you'll pick up a use.
Yes or no?
Yes or no.
But
But at what level?
because
It's
the
tough.
issue is being impaired, right?
Correct.
Because it's a legal substance.
Correct.
Okay.
I will share with you, the University of San Diego, or UC San Diego, is working on developing similar standards that were developed to measure blood alcohol when somebody's being arrested, to measure that level of impairment.
Okay, because that seems to be the key, right?
It is,
Yeah,
it
okay.
is, yeah.
Just curious.
So I have a question first.
Christine?
Thank you. So now, do we, the form of testing, so do the probationer have a choice, or do the board ask them?
We tell them the test that they have to have.
So, so they will, so let's say if the board asks the probationer to all have hair tests, which, is actually pretty accurate and, and will sustain for a long time, then they have no choice. They will have to go to that site and, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this may have been discussed in a previous meeting. So probationers who, due to the advent of the legalization of marijuana, have a legitimate sort of prescription for marijuana and they use marijuana and that comes up in the testing, how is that currently managed
What
by
we do,
us?
we ask for prescriptions that the probationers are currently on, or as they get new prescriptions, so that when they are tested and those levels are detected, it's excused because it's a prescription. It's no different than a prescription from Vicodin.
So if someone is smoking marijuana, that comes up and they have a
Right.
prescription, it's not an
Yeah,
issue?
Not an issue.
Any other public comment before moving on? Rebecca?
Rebecca Gonzalez, NASW, California. I have 2 questions. One, because of the high cost of the testing, do you ever have probationers that just drop out because of the cost?
Sometimes, more often, Lovely, what I've seen is the probationers that were not subject to the recent PEth tests.
Right.
That are doing the PEth test now are dropping and surrendering their license because we've confirmed their alcohol use. That's what
Okay.
I'm seeing more of. Yeah, I mean.
So more of that than people who just maybe have been
Right.
complying for a while, but they drop out because they just can't afford it anymore.
I think I've had a handful on that route. But, there's various benchmarks within the probation period that allow us independently to reduce the frequency of testing. But, of course, the primary consideration is how they performed in that prior year. I mean, if they've had no positives, then they
Right.
can automatically move down to a lower frequency.
Okay. And then my second question, we were talking about the marijuana use. I guess I wonder why you would have to look for a prescription now that it's legal.
Just because it pops up, if we're unaware of use, then it could be considered a violation of probation because it's being detected.
Think of it as alcohol.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's really what we're doing. Otherwise, I would hate to issue a violation,
Right.
a notice of noncompliance to the probationer, when in fact there's a legitimate reason for them to have it.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Ben Caldwell, AMFT. Just a related question on costs. We sometimes hear from probationers about concerns related to the costs associated with probation. Do you all collect any data about probation completion? Do you have any sense of the proportion of people who successfully complete probation versus surrendering their license along the way, moving out of state, et cetera?
We haven't done that. I mean, it's been very spotty, but now that I have a manager directly responsible for the oversight of the probation program, we are going to start providing that information.
It would be useful and informative
Oh,
data,
yeah.
just to see what, I mean, anything that's an expense is going to be burdensome to some. The expenses associated with probation related to substance use are particularly trying for some probationers. It would just be interesting to find out how much of a factor that becomes in their ability to successfully complete the process.
Right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ben.
Leah?
So to piggyback off of that, I think it's really important, and I don't know how else we can do this, to inform people of the cost of probation. So for a high blood alcohol level, it's about $10,000 a year to be able to go through probation. And we tell our students when they're applying to the program, at admissions, at orientation, in the law and ethics class, it's really, really important that people understand. Now, so of course, the majority of people who come to us had their DUI, then they got sober, then they went to school, and then they're coming. So that's really the vast majority. It's a very small percentage that we see who have a DUI while post-licensure. It's maybe, it happens, but it's maybe 10%. I mean, it seems like the vast majority are at the associate level. They're applying for their associate number. But I think it's really important that they're informed, hey, this is $10,000 a year, Uber's cheaper.
Well, and that certainly is something that we could look at our professional organizations as just reminding people in the newsletters and whatnot.
I know that when I do outreach activities with the students, and USC in particular last spring, I mean, my message is probation is not private and it's expensive. And I share what the costs are. It's, and in terms of not being private, it's more than just having your name on our, page of shame or on the website. It's you are having to provide that sample in front of another individual. And, that's a challenge for a lot of people. So I think it's just education. And as much as we can get that out there, I mean, a $10 Uber Lyft ride is far cheaper than what you're going to pay me. Far cheaper.
Okay, moving on. Let's move to welcome, I had one more.
So, yeah, should we do the personnel update and the strategic plan update first before? Yeah.
Did we miss something on the?
My apologies. Okay, so the strategic, we'll jump to personnel. We have a few vacancies. One in particular is our exam manager. I've held off on doing that, filling that position, primarily because I simply do not have space in our office. So, but those duties have been assigned to another manager, and we're running pretty smoothly. We welcomed a new employee, Crystal Newton, and she's working in our licensing unit doing the LEP applications, and we're really happy to have her on board. And then we had a departure. Our receptionist, Antoinette Pennell, departed us. So the friendly voice at BBS that we all got comfortable with has moved on. And we are in the midst of reviewing applications for that position. I believe Mark said he had over 200 applications for that. So he's having to look at those now and select the best fit, and we'll conduct interviews. I will fill the exam and cashiering unit manager once I get confirmation that we can start on our build in the new suite. We have a half-time probation monitor that we're waiting on a vacancy, and we have Sandy Wright departed and retired a few months ago. So we have her position vacant. John is in the process of setting up interviews. The MFT evaluator position, a candidate has been selected. We're just waiting for final HR approval. And that's the personnel update. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you for catching that. I'm so eager to talk today. So our strategic plan is included, and we did add due dates at Dr. Brew's request. So it's here provided, it's just here for your information and updates. But I think we're moving forward in the right direction on a lot of the target objectives and goals. So if there are any questions about that, I'll be happy to answer them. Okay. One highlight I haven't mentioned that I would like to mention is that we met with DCA's Solid Team, and we are in the initial stages of beginning to develop video tutorials that will be placed on the website. Application process, licensure process, just anywhere where we can tag that quick 2-minute video. So those that like visual instructions will have it.
So
Yes.
Kim, just a quick question on the plan to talk about options to assist candidates in the examination process. Have we talked about that in terms of OPS and
Yeah.
their? Okay.
Yeah, we did. Steve and Mark met with OPES about it. Do you want to summarize that really quick? Or, other than we met? Yeah, so we're in the initial discussion, but,
We met and we've talked about ideas, I think before we had talked about practice exams and stuff. We're still exploring options. Yeah.
Because I think that's the crux of the concerns that the board has. I think the concerns that our stakeholders have in terms of the pass rates. It seems like some kind of coordinated effort with OPES is where we're going to get some outcomes. So that certainly, is there a planned next meeting?
I can bring back some ideas, I think, next. I mean, that
Okay. I mean,
or a general idea of where we maybe are going with that, so.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
finally, I'll share with you that we are very close to securing a contract with a new examination vendor. So we're very excited about the new vendor, and if things go well, the new vendor will be here at our next meeting to provide a presentation about what they have to offer.
Great, thank you. So now we can really move forward to the Department of Consumer Affairs update, and we are going to welcome Deputy Director Chris Castrillo and Deputy Director Karen Nelson. Or just Deputy Director Castrillo.
Sad to report you're just stuck with me today. Sorry.
That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you all for the opportunity to provide an update today at the board meeting. I want to run through a couple of quick department updates and then touch base on the executive officer salary study, which we are well underway and excited to provide some updates for you. October 29th, we hosted our Directors Quarterly meeting. This is the last Directors Quarterly of 2018. We provided an update on the executive officer salary studies to our executive officers who are in attendance. Kim, appreciate you being there to participate. And we also included a draft plan to assist our boards and bureaus to implement AB 2138, which we know folks are well aware of, and our legislative affairs team, along with the entire executive office, is working on putting together some draft implementation plans for that bill, as we know that we all have a workload to look forward to as we move into 2019. December 7th, we're going to be hosting our Directors Leadership Call. This has been an effort by Director Garfilo to encourage participation from board presidents and vice presidents, structured very similarly to our Executive Officer Directors Quarterly. We want to make sure that we're facilitating that level of communication to our board leadership as well. Again, that's going to be on December 7th. Chair Connolly, and we hope you're able to participate in that. Fantastic. And then we're going to have an agenda out shortly. I think a lot of the topics are going to be what we've covered on the Executive Officer Directors Quarterly. We'll include an update on the salary study on there as well. So we look forward to having you. Licensing and enforcement work groups, and we appreciate the work that your staff has done on this. Just as a reminder, on a monthly basis, we've been getting folks from licensing staff at all of our boards and folks from enforcement staff at all of our boards, trying to determine what some of our best practices are and how we can, streamline some of our licensing and enforcement practices across all of our boards. We've been working really closely with our OAS data governance team, and this month on the licensing side, we're going to be releasing what I would consider to be a pretty exciting tool. It's going to be a forward-facing open data portal. This is going to show a lot of the licensing statistics that you have included in your annual report, but it's just going to be there in one nice, clean format. I think ideally we're going to be able to move this thing forward to where one click, you're able to generate a PDF, boom, maybe part of your board materials, nice graphs. So just an effort to take a lot of the data that we do have, reformat it, and put it in a good public-facing way. So we're very excited about that, and that's one of the items that we've been working on with both the licensing and enforcement work group. As I mentioned, the licensing portal that'll be out sometime in December. Enforcement, we have a few more data points that we need to work out with that one, so that'll trail a little bit behind, but we're hoping that one will be live come early 2019. Another quick update, and Kim, we appreciate your mentorship in the Future Leadership Development Program. So we like to plug this program as much as we can. This has been a huge priority for Director Garfilo as well, essentially looking for staff at all of our boards and bureaus who are looking forward to becoming our next assistant executive officers, our next executive officers. This year we have a cohort of 7 folks. Doing it a little bit differently this year, and frankly, I'm personally excited. Each of these cohorts has a project. So we have streamlining DCA's subject matter expert witness program. One of the cohorts is working with the licensing and enforcement work groups to review our performance measures and potentially look at refining those as it relates to both licensing and enforcement. And then the third project is awareness campaign for California veterans and spouses licensure benefits. How do we get the word out better that folks know what services are available to them? So again, we've kind of expanded this program where it's not only do they get to engage with elected officials, some of our other appointees, obviously working with our executive officers, but in addition, they're getting their hands on to some projects that we think are going to be very beneficial to the department. So we're thrilled, and again, Kim, we appreciate your participation, and that's very, very helpful. Last item for the board members themselves is 2019 coming around the corner, and we have some new dates for the board member orientation training. I'm trying to look around the room and see who that might pertain to, but we did 4 meetings in 2018. We're going to try to do things a little bit differently in 2019. We're going to cut that down to 3 meetings, try to make sure we get critical mass for each of the meetings, and we're going to host one of them in the LA area. We've had a lot of responses from a lot of our board members across all of our DC entities about getting a training down in LA. It's something that we had done previously to my arrival here at the department, so we want to bring that back. So we would encourage our board members who are going to be attending that are in the LA area, save that LA date. Of course, you're always welcome to come up to Sacramento, and you don't need to write these down. We'll be sure to send them out, but just so you know, we're looking at March 27th will be our first meeting of the year. The June 19th meeting, that's the one that we have targeted to be in LA, location to be determined, and then October 23rd will be our final meeting of 2019. And again, we'll send that around, and we'll send that out to Kim and make sure that you all have that. Yes.
So I'm curious why you always have these meetings Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, when as a board member, we commit to Thursdays and Fridays for board meetings. Is it just our board that does that? Because I teach on Wednesdays, so
yeah, so
I can't
our
miss
board member,
Wednesdays.
so since I've been here, we've done BMOT on Mondays, and Monday is a specific reason because we have a lot of our boards, as you are all here today on a Friday. We don't really have board meetings on Monday, and that's pretty standard across all of the departments. So I know it's an extra day for folks. Let's say you have a board meeting Thursday, Friday, and then you gotta maybe schlep up to Sacramento for an orientation training. But most of our boards don't have a board meeting on Monday, and the availability for a board member to attend an orientation training is much better on a Monday.
I see.
Okay. Sorry, Dr.
I mean,
Brew.
we have to do it every other year, so
Yeah,
my thought is like,
yeah.
that's really, really hard, because I always teach Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and I can't miss teaching, so.
Of course, yeah.
But
And-
that's just me, and I'm only one person.
No,
so.
I totally understand. And again, always a work in progress. That's why we're trying the LA thing, where we're trying to, we found that for the most part Monday works, but, we're always open to tinkering this. We want to make it as easy as possible for you all to attend. And since it is a required training, we want to make sure it's able to happen.
My suggestion would be that you choose, if you have 3 dates, 3 different days of the week.
Okay.
Because yes, some board members can't make a Thursday or Friday, but all the others could. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I have a question. Is
Yeah.
there, to that same effect, is there also any consideration for maybe providing a shorter update for board members who've already been on the board for 2, 4, 6 years, so that they have a smaller amount of time, maybe in online mandatory training, a half-day training, just to sort of
Yeah.
honor the fact that they've been doing this a while, and a lot of the information is redundant and repetitive for us?
Yeah, so I would say we've kicked that around. What we balance is the reason, a big reason why we have folks who are reappointed to the boards attend these orientation trainings is that we think the mix of new board members and reappointed board members is important for the training overall. That way we have folks who are fresh coming into their position as a board member, mingling, interacting with folks who have, as you point out, maybe been on a board for 2 to 4 to 6 years. That being said, it's a point that's been raised by other board members at other boards. We have looked into, maybe we can cover some of the stuff that applies very directly to new board members towards the end of the meeting, maybe do a half day for folks who have returned. But at this point, we haven't solidified that. So moving forward, it's sort of as is, but it is something that we are taking a look at. Okay. And then just my last update, as I mentioned, the executive officer salary study. We have contracted with a consultant, KH Consulting. They are about 2 months into their project. We just had a meeting yesterday with the consultant, and as I mentioned, we provided an update at the Director's Quarterly early October. This has been targeted for a 6-month completion date, so we're looking at late February, early March. We have completed what I would say the first step in compiling information. That has been the consultant conducted 12 interviews with a handful of our executive officers, and Kim, appreciate you taking the time to speak with a consultant. That is their approach to kind of getting the landscape of issues as the EOs see it. Our previous study in 2011, we got feedback that there wasn't a whole lot of executive officer participation. And so we wanted to make sure that one of our top priorities for this study was that the EOs were going to be engaged from the get-go. Granted that we only have a certain amount of time and dollars to work with, we didn't have the ability to have the consultant interview every EO, but as a response to that, and part of the meeting that we had yesterday, we are crafting basically a survey, a questionnaire that will go out to each of the executive officers, very detailed, a number of data points for them to provide, their licensee population, to what, they think the key aspects of their positions are, very, very much paraphrasing the study. It'll be quite detailed. From that, we're going to get a very good number of opinions and pieces of data for the consultant to take a look at. Then they will go ahead and start analyzing that data and work towards providing a draft of the report early 2019, as I mentioned, for a final release of February 2019. So that is well underway, and that's all I have in terms of updates. I'm happy to answer any questions you have on the salary study or anything else that I had mentioned.
I'm sure there's lots of questions.
I'm sure, yeah, I
I'm sure.
anticipate.
So I see Lee over here.
Howdy.
So will you also be looking at equity?
Yes, so, I think we have included gender parity as part of so when we did a scope of work for the project, we did a number of key issues that we want the consultant to take a look at. Gender parity amongst our EOs is one of those.
So
Yes.
is it the gender of the EO or the gender of the profession? Because those are two very different measurements, I think.
Right, so I think our main interest and what we had heard from other boards, including BBS and others, is take a look at the gender parity of the pay scale amongst the EOs within the department. I think as part of taking a look into that, we have communicated, and I know that you had mentioned this to Karen the last time she was down here, that to the extent the consultant would look at the licensee population and how that might communicate, and again, keeping that pertinent to the study is something that we would have them take a look at.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Will the final report become a public document, or will this something
Yeah,
that
we'll
will
be sharing
remain
this
internal?
with all of our executive officers and, of course, our board members as well. Yeah.
Any other questions from board members? No?
Yes.
Christina?
So once the report is out, is it just a recommendation document? Or
Yeah.
what will be the next step afterwards?
Yeah, so I think it's a great question. You know, the document is, I've been referring to it, I'm hoping it's a roadmap. There's a number of issues that we're trying to take a look at here. It's not just we're going to have this report and then real and/or perceived issues with executive officer salary are going to be fixed like that. We're trying to take a look at not just the equity issue, which I spoke to, the breakdown of programs and how their salary bands are related to their specific program, but we're also taking a look at the process too. How does the evaluation process work? How are we communicating the raise issue to each of our executive officers? I think one of the things that has very clearly come back through its initial round of surveys is this level of transparency and communication. What are the metrics that we're looking for if a request is going to be approved? How should we gear that request? If a request is going to be denied, maybe where do we miss the mark? So it's not just looking at, hey, here are some salaries that might be worth taking a closer look at and might be rearranged this way, that, or the other, but also really digging into the process as well. So to kind of get back to your question, the study is intended to illuminate all of that. On the salary side, let me back up. On the process side, that's all completely within DCA's control. So when we kind of dictate to you, hey, here's how the evaluation process goes. If you're going to do a salary increase request, please, let's gear it towards these specific metrics. Frankly, I think that's very easy, and I look forward to doing that once we are able to get the study results back. I believe, as I have mentioned to you all previously, with respect to the salary increased request process, we are one level in part of a multi-level look at that request, right? So I wouldn't be able to tell you that it would be a cure of all ills, because that's also going to need feedback from agency, the governor's office. Obviously, we have a new administration coming in, but we do think it's going to provide some really, really good data points that we could point to. So at least when we bring these issues up, that we can say, hey, we've had this pretty in-depth study, and here's what it's telling us. So.
And I trust that, the report will be shared with agency and the governor's office, or even keep them informed about the process and the directions that DCA is doing, so that, they can also do their part, because the recommendation is only recommendations.
Of course. And
The actual, whether the adjustment of the change, for this EO salary is really up that level.
Yeah,
So-
and agency and the governor's office have been engaged since the get-go. I mean, just the ability to go out and contract this study, the inclusion of this as part of DCA's strategic plan, they have been kind of lockstep with us as we go. So we keep them updated as we're keeping you updated here today.
Any questions from the public? Then I'd like to thank you very much for coming and sharing the information.
Very welcome.
Look
Thanks.
forward to hearing the results of the study.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
All right.
Well, we could. I'd prefer that we move through Roseanne's next item and then take a longer break, because I know some of us have to go up to our rooms and get our suitcases. And so could we power through the next and then take a substantial 15, 20-minute break? 15 minutes? Yeah, okay. Roseanne, thank you very much.
Okay. Well, it's that time of year again when we have to start thinking about the 2019 Omnibus Bill. And what that is it's a collection of sort of items that over the year, either staff or board members or stakeholders have come to us saying, hey, there's some lack of clarity in the law or something that needs to be fixed. To qualify for the omnibus bill, a provision is required, the change is required to be technical and non-substantive. It doesn't have a big effect on the law. So here we have about 9 items proposed, and so I'll go through them and then we can go with any questions that we might, or comments we might have. So the first item for consideration is that we would, there has been a proposal to make some changes to the wording of the law and ethics coursework topics required for MFTs. The coursework for California law and ethics covers a variety of specific topics. And one is the differences in legal and ethical standards for different types of work settings. And during recent committee meetings for the license portability proposal, it was suggested that the requirement should be changed rather than saying the differences in legal and ethical standards in different types of work settings. It should be the application of legal and ethical standards in different types of work settings. That the thought is that would clarify that the legal and ethical standards are not necessarily different in work settings, but they are applied differently depending on where the setting is. And so we're proposing to make that change. A corresponding change is being made to the LMFT out-of-state requirements and the LCSW requirements in the proposed license portability language that we're going to run as a bill proposal this year. So we're just making this change in one other place for consistency with that. LPCCs are their law and ethics are in a core content area, so the wording's a little different, so it's not applicable to LPCCs. So that's the first proposal. Moving on to the second proposal, we are proposing to amend Business and Professions Codes 4988.36 for MFTs and 4999.32 and 33 for LCSWs. To mention that the degree must be a single integrated degree program for licensure. We have sort of an ongoing issue of applicants, particularly in the LPCC unit, occasionally we see somebody trying to piece together a 60-unit degree, and the program is really meant to be a single degree program. That's implied in the law, but it doesn't specifically state it for the newer degree requirements. It used to when we just had a licensing law that was for one degree and there was no changes in the degree requirements based on the age of the degree. So even though it's implied, we would like to specifically state it, the licensing unit. It's helpful for them to have something to point to say, no, right here it says it has to be a single integrated degree. So we're proposing to make that change. Another change that we're proposing, moving on, is to the LMFT and LPCC law. There is provisions in those statutes that require an applicant to have coursework or practicum in assessment, diagnosis, or prognosis. And at a previous committee meeting, we had a suggestion from a board member that replacing the term prognosis with the term treatment planning might be a bit more accurate. So we're proposing throughout our licensing laws in those sections affected to replace the term prognosis with the term treatment planning instead. Another just really technical cleanup item. A lot of our code sections in law refer to laws and regulations. Technically, the more accurate term would be statutes and regulations. A law really refers to a statute or a regulation, where a statute is something passed by a state legislature or a national Congress, and a regulation is something written by a government agency. So we just wanted to do some cleanup to, instead of saying laws and regulations, we want to say statutes and regulations. Item number 5, the next item, has to do with where we specify pre-licensee service locations. Currently, our law states that trainees, associates, or applicants for licensure shall only perform mental health or related services where their employer regularly conducts business and services. In a discussion at the exempt setting committee, we were crafting some language about acceptable work settings and talking about what happens when it's a work site placed by a third-party temporary agency. And the committee recommended in those cases that the language be changed to having the individual permitted to perform services at the places where the work site permits business to be conducted. So that's going to be proposed in some of the upcoming exempt setting committee language that you're going to see. We thought to make it consistent throughout, we might want to change it in other places. It just better accounts for a situation where an associate might occasionally be required to travel, let's say, to a patient's home or other site to do treatment in certain circumstances. Our next proposal, item number 6, has to do with a section in the law for each of our 4 license types. Each license type has a section about pending complaints or investigations and examinations. And these sections outline the parameters regarding examination when an applicant has a pending complaint against him or her, or the board's conducting an investigation. And we're proposing 3 amendments to update these sections. The first one, current law permits us to withhold the results of an examination under certain circumstances if a complaint or investigation is pending. That language is pretty outdated. We actually are not able to withhold examination results. All exams are now given electronically. And so when the person that's testing completes the exam at the site, the score automatically comes up. We don't have there's no option to withhold it or not. So it's not feasible to withhold it for some and not others. The second change that we're proposing, the statute permits the board to deny admission to an exam or refuse to issue a license if there's an accusation or statement of issues filed against the applicant. Occasionally, we also have cases where we issue a petition to revoke probation due to violations of probationary terms, and the applicant is also in the process of applying to take an exam or applying for licensure. So the request was to allow the board to be permitted to deny exam or admission or refuse to issue the license in this case as well, if we're filing a petition to revoke. And then finally, to this section, another really minor change. It has a 2016 effective date, so we would just delete that. It's already past 2016, so we don't need it. So, the next change, item number 7, has to do with our aging and long-term care requirement for the MFT license type. We have a section in law that specifies that licensees, and it should read, the title of that should read licensees, not applicants. I apologize for that. Licensees who began graduate study prior to January 1, 2004 must complete 3 hours of CE, continuing education, in aging and long-term care during the next renewal period. The provision is no longer needed. Any applicant applying with either a new or an old degree already has the aging and long-term care requirement. It's also in there for out-of-state applicants. So there's no way at this point that somebody would miss that. They would either have had to complete the requirement upon renewal back in 2005 or 6 when they renewed, or they would have had it in order to get licensure. So we can delete that. Moving on, item 8, spousal or partner abuse assessment coursework requirement. This applies, some changes are needed to MFT and LCSW law, or we're proposing some changes. Both MFT and LCSW law require 7 hours of continuing education in spousal or partner abuse if the person's degree was begun prior to January 1, 2004. There is also a similar requirement repeated as a condition of licensure for LMFT applicants and LCSW applicants if they have older degrees, but the exact number of hours is not specified. However, when read together as a whole, the 2 sections imply that to get a license, you have to have the coursework, not a specific number of hours, but then once you're licensed, the year after you get the next year when you go to renew, then you're going to have to make sure it was 7 hours upon renewal. We'd like to streamline these requirements and just require the 7 hours up front. Requiring coursework after licensure via CE, it can only be verified via an audit if the person happens to get audited. And it also can contribute to the high failure rate of CE audits because the applicants forget that they're supposed to take this one additional coursework. They know they have to have their 36 hours, but they don't remember necessarily to go take, oh, I have to have 5 more hours in this. And there's not really a good way to remind each specific person. So we are recommending that generally requiring the 7 hours up front is a better practice. And then finally, a change regarding petition for reinstatement of a registration. We have a section in law for all of our license types. It discusses the timeframes for a disciplined license to petition the board to modify their disciplinary action. Including when they can petition for reinstatement of a revoked license or registration. However, our law actually prohibits a registration from being renewed or reinstated beyond 6 years from when it was issued. So the law can lead to a problem the way that it's written there. When a revoked registration expires while it's revoked and it's 6 years older or more, Section 499.30 states that they can petition for a reinstatement after a certain period of time, but the law actually prohibits it. So we're just proposing to amend 4990.30 to note that if a registrant is applying for reinstatement is ineligible for reinstatement, then they can apply for a subsequent registration number. We discussed these proposed changes at the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting in October, and the committee reviewed all of the proposed changes and directed staff to present the amendments to the full board for consideration as a legislative proposal.
Thank you, Roseanne. Do we have any questions on Leah?
I really like what you've done here, but something really stood out to me on numbers 7 and 8, where you talk about aging and long-term care, as well as the DV stuff. You didn't do that with HIV, and I'm curious why.
The HIV changes, they're not obsolete. I think that, we can take a look at that, but I think that there was nothing in those ones that were obsolete. I would have to look further at exactly where it was.
So they're not currently expected to be integrated in programs right now?
I think the way that that's written, though, I would have to review it again. It's been a while since I've looked at that one, but it wasn't, that one hasn't been an issue with how it's implemented.
Yeah, I was just thinking if the logic is you only get caught when you get audited, maybe it's because when they do their first renewal, you check for that? Is that maybe what's different about this? Since they have to do it in their first renewal cycle?
Don't think so, but I think that the way that that one's written, there was a little bit different. The way that the aging and long-term care, some of them were obsolete, they didn't need to be in there anymore, where HIV was added more recently. And so that one, I would have to look. It's kind of a different case. It's kind of written a little bit different. I know that.
I'm just thinking for future
Sure.
discussion items for the P&A committee, they may want to consider, either removing it because it's changed so much from when that law started, and I would assume the relevance around it is different than it was 10 years ago or whatever. Or B, if keeping it, that maybe you would want to put it in programs so you don't get stuck with this CE audit being the only way to really catch people. I'm not sure, but if that's a logic that you're using, then we should use it for everything. And that's the only other one I know of that's a post-degree kind of thing.
Sure.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
yeah, we can definitely look at that.
Ben?
Ben Caldwell, AMFT. My question sort of parallels Dr. Brew's. On the question, on the issue regarding spousal and partner abuse assessment coursework, the spirit of SB 33 a few years ago was to allow training programs to sort of structure their program as they saw fit, understanding that it needed to include these required content areas. Spousal and partner abuse assessment and intervention being one of those required content areas. So it comes across as strange to tell training programs there's not an hour requirement within the program, but for applicants, there is a total hour requirement between your program and then CE that you have to do post-graduation and whether it's pre-license or in the first cycle after licensure. It would seem more in keeping with the spirit of SB 33 to simply make this a required content area within the degree program and then let degree programs determine for themselves how many hours is most appropriate. There's nothing I'm aware of in terms of the research literature that says 7 hours of training in that area is meaningfully different from 6 or 8 or 10 or however many a particular program would want to offer. Certainly this is seen as an important enough issue in MFT training that you would be hard-pressed to find a training program anywhere in the country that doesn't meaningfully address it. So I just wonder whether there's a simpler way of addressing this problem by making it a content area in the degree program and leaving it at that.
Christina.
I think, Ben, what you're also saying is, in my opinion, that it's a bigger picture from the board point of view, that to revisit, all those required classes, because, it's been really obsolete, over time, like Leah say, HIV may be pertinent, many years ago, but time has changed a lot. So I think you brought up that bigger issue is what really are the required classes, that would save the license, the registrants, times and efforts, and yet be able to have those CE contents and applicable to their professional. So I think it's a bigger conversation.
Do you want to just answer that? Sabina has a...
I'm sure Roseanne probably was going to say the same thing, but this seems, and I could be wrong because you're the expert, that this is capturing people who began their study prior to 2004 when maybe that wasn't a requirement. And they're just to capture that small population because I'm assuming it is part of the curriculum now?
Right. So we're not amending 4980.36, which is for the newer degrees. We're looking at the, this is looking at the statute for the older degrees and kind of amending that. Moving forward, it was part of SB 33, and 4980.36 does capture that. There's not a number of hours in there. It's integrated, but for the older, we still have that.
So you're thinking about people who are maybe coming in from out of state with older types of degrees.
Right, or for the few people that maybe have an older degree and are applying now, there wouldn't be very many of them. It's mainly out of state.
But it's not a major concern on our part. It does bring rise to that larger philosophical question, but I think you're right, it's not going to capture a large number of people.
Right.
The other question I wanted to raise, if I may, relates to number 4, where you're talking about references to laws and regulations. Looking at least specifically at the section of MFT law that is highlighted there, that refers to, I believe, content that needs to be reviewed in supervision. And while it is more precise to say statutes and regulations as opposed to laws and regulations, there are some forms of law that would apply to MFTs and should be included in the supervision process that don't necessarily come in the form of statute or regulation. Case law being the easiest example. There may also be appropriate local ordinances relative to professional practice that really should be part of that supervision process. So I wonder whether either the phrase applicable law or simply the term law, because all of those are various forms of law, is a better fit there than saying statutes and regulations, which is narrower.
Yeah, I'm thinking about custody like who has custody in a divorce situation. That's a law that's not tied specifically to our law, or it is a statute.
Yeah, I think what Roseanne was trying to change was to capture our practice. I mean, not only our Practice Act, but any statutes that are set by the legislature would be
But like
statutes.
the Tarasoff case, how about would that work?
And that's to his point, is
Yeah.
that it doesn't accurately capture case law and any other, maybe county, city.
Thank you.
Do we need to bring that back somewhere, Roseanne, or can
So,
we direct?
You guys can make the changes that you want now before you direct them to pursue.
To make a motion, yeah. Mhm. So how would you change that, Roseanne?
So for the aging and long-term care and the spousal, well, the aging and long-term care, the one section is just obsolete. For the spousal and partner abuse, we could definitely hold it back and have it as part of a bigger discussion if you wanted. Probably that bigger discussion couldn't go in the omnibill.
No, it's more the number 4. Instead
Oh.
of using the word statutes and regulations, it excludes case law.
We would probably have to pull that back and look at it again.
So it's not, it doesn't sound like something we can fix right now.
Unless you guys want to propose a fix.
Unless there's one that, unless you want to go through them. I mean, we can take another look at it, or we can look at it now, but we probably want to pull it back and look at it.
That's your recommendation, is that we just pull it
Yeah.
back?
And it's not, if we pull it back and we look at it and we get the language in time for the February, March board meeting, it's not too late to include it in the omni-bill.
Yeah.
So just for my clarification, tell me again, because I know we've covered this, the difference between statute and regulation.
A statute is something that's either by Congress or by a state legislature, where regulations are actually crafted by state agencies and approved that way through a approval body, like OAL in California, the Office of Administrative Law approves regulations.
And also the other way is based on past laws, and they would direct the agencies to develop regulations to implement the law, or the statute, I should say.
So for very simple terms, business and professions codes are statutes. California Code of Regulations are regulations. And when we run a bill, it's a statute. And when we initiate the rulemaking process, it's a regulation.
Weird microphone game.
Gabriel.
Well, could we just say laws, statutes, and regulations?
We'll go back and look and come up with a proposal.
Janley?
Janley Wong, NASW. Before I get to what Ben was talking about, statute and regulations is two things that go together all the time. So when the legislature, whether it's Congress or the state legislature, passes a law, it's a statute. And generally, it's very general. The language is pretty general, and it doesn't really explain how an agency is supposed to implement that law. So the law goes to the agency, the right agency, which has a crew of attorneys who draft regulations that put a little bit more detail into how the agency is going to implement that law. But those regulations have to be thoroughly reviewed, as explained in the previous board meeting to you, how the regulatory process works, because you did not have elected people drafting those regulations. You had state employees, attorneys, et cetera. So it goes through a thorough public review process. So when you compare the two, that's a good way to understand the difference. Take the statute, take the regulations, look at the two. The first thing you'll notice is the regulations are usually longer than the statute. And that's because they've added more specificity to the regulations to explain how the agency is going to implement the law. I want to talk about the idea of requiring additional coursework, curriculum courses, that whole thing. And I'm glad that people here brought up the point that this is really remedial for older degrees, and I think that's really important because we have to assume that schools and degree programs and professionals who are already graduated keep up with current issues that are very important, extremely important. So, for example, the opioid epidemic. It'd be great if the board said, well, we think that's so important, we want all schools to teach about the opioid epidemic. But where does it stop? There are so many topics in our human services field that you would end up being like the accreditation body for degrees, requiring every single content area, program area, service area course to be taught in all these programs. And as you know, the master's program in general is only a two-year program, and about half of that program is actually a practicum or field work. So you can't keep putting course content into a degree program. It just doesn't work. The HIV thing, it sounds like it's over, it's old, it's whatever. It's actually not over, and it's a huge problem in communities of color, as you all know. So how best to update practitioners on what's going on in that area, okay? It could be through continuing education. It could be through extension courses. It could be through in-service. In fact, many public agencies, counties, provide in-service on that topic. And then there are all kinds of other areas which could be covered, might be covered, will be covered. One particular one that I'm pretty sensitive to is the post-traumatic stress disorder that immigrants are facing right now. Given the situation at the border, separation of children and families, it's horrific. And anybody who cares about people, if you just look at some of the interviews they've done with the parents and with the children, it's shocking what's going on. So people who are in our field, licensed mental health professionals, they know about this. They're reading everything they can, they're going to workshops. So the board should feel comfortable that professionals are keeping up with these topic areas and not start thinking, we need to mandate this, we need to require this. And then finally, there's a long history by this board that avoids trying to require additional courses. There's a very long history. We went through a lot of that recently regarding the suicide requirement. It is a horrific problem, the suicide requirement, and the legislature seemed convinced that we should go that route, so that's the route we've gone. But we have a long history of saying, let professionals determine what content, what areas they need to focus on, get further training, and develop their expertise. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? It sounds like you're going to take that back, Roseanne, and bring that back to us.
So it sounds like we want to pull back on item 4. And item 8, the spousal and partner abuse. So we can take another look at those. The aging and long-term care, do we still want to delete that section that's obsolete? Okay, so leave 7. So yeah, I don't think item 8, it sounds like it's part of a bigger discussion. I don't think it's an omnibus bill item. It would be a more, require a deeper discussion. So we would probably not put that back in the omnibus bill this year, but number 4, we could take another look at and bring a recommendation back next meeting.
Thanks, Roseanne. So I had hoped to get all through this, but it sounds like we're having a little bit more substantive discussion than I had anticipated. Leah?
I could make a motion, except I turned off my computer and I forget what the motion would be. Could someone tell me what my motion would be to accept everything except for those 2 pieces?
And move it forward?
Uh-huh. And make any non-substantive changes?
Right.
If you want to read it. Oh, here we go. Let's see. Direct staff to make any discussed changes and any non-substantive changes, and to pursue legislation to make the amendments.
I'll second that.
Christina?
Any further discussion?
Any other discussion about the further discussion?
Okay.
Okay, then Christina, let's go ahead and call for a vote.
Gabriel Lamb?
Aye.
Deborah Brown? Aye. Jonathan Maddox?
Yes.
Dr. Peter Chu?
Aye.
Rika Stout?
Yes.
Dr. Christine Whitlisbach?
Yes.
Betty Conley?
Yes.
Christina Wong?
Yes.
Dr. Leah Brew?
Yes.
Alexander Kim?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Yeah, I'm going to propose that we go ahead and take our break. We ended up having more conversation than I'd anticipated. So it is currently 10:20. Let's come back at 10:35. Behavioral Sciences, it is 10:51 on Friday morning, the 30th. And we are going back to Roseanne. Roseanne, you're going to talk about the possible action regarding registrant employment by temporary staffing agencies.
That's actually, that's me, yep. That's okay.
Sorry, Christy.
That's okay. That's all right, no worries.
Yeah.
No worries. So the exempt setting committee we've been discussing issues at length about registrants gaining hours of experience while they're placed in a setting by a temporary employment agency. And this is seen a lot at the VA to address staffing shortages. I'm sure it happens in other types of settings as well. And our current law doesn't address a temp agency's involvement in placing individuals who are gaining experience toward licensure. And there are certain provisions of our existing law that are a poor fit for this situation, especially when the temp agency is considered the individual's employer. So we've been developing some regulatory language to address these issues. We've worked a lot with stakeholders. And just to kind of want to preface this, a lot of the issue, all the issues arise when the temp agency is the employer, but we've kind of avoided using that specific language in this proposed text because this could vary a little bit, and there's some really complicated case law on the issue, so we're still able to address it, but we're not going to reference them really as the employer. So there's sort of three areas we're going to address. So right now, a trainee or associate can only perform services at the places that are permitted by the employer, but in the case of a temp agency, that doesn't make a lot of sense. They're placed with an agency that's providing the services to clients, so it makes sense to have that contracting agency is what we're calling where they've been placed, is the contracting agency. They're responsible for the clinical services, so the proposed language would specify that contracting agency shall determine where the supervisee may perform services. The next area of law has to do with the written oversight agreement that's required when the supervisor and supervisee have different employers. So it's signed by the supervisee's employer and the supervisor. This agreement is for the purpose of clarifying the supervisor's responsibilities and to provide for supervisor access to client records. Because if the supervisor doesn't have the same employer, that might get a little bit muddy when they're trying to access those client records. So that written agreement, we're going to specify that it shall be between the contracting agency and the supervisor because the temp agency has no role in that. It also is, the proposed language clarifies that there would be no written agreement required when the supervisor is an employee of the contracting agency, regardless of who's technically the supervisee's employer. And then the last piece is just a really clarification issue that any supervisee placed by a temp agency must either be a W-2 employee or a volunteer, which our statute already requires that, but this is really just for emphasis because we have a problem with temp agencies often issuing a 1099. So the exempt setting committee considered this language, as well as the Policy and Advocacy Committee approved it at their last meeting. So this would be a regulation proposal. So we, Sabina, I watched in our last meeting, I transcribed the motion that you would like us to use.
I saw that. That was perfect.
Yay, okay, good. So I love the webcasts. I can
Very
go back
impressed.
and watch. So that's it there.
You have the motion. You don't have to listen to me rattle it off.
So is there any discussion? Any public comment on this issue? Wow.
I'll make a motion.
Nope. Only kidding.
Kathy Atkins with the California Association of Marriage and Family Therapists. I wanted to thank the BBS and the board for reviewing this issue. I know it's been problematic. And for the most part, we support the language. I know some of our staff had expressed previous concerns about sort of the word employer and how a lack of clarity could lead to some potential liability issues. And while that falls on to the temp agency or the agency, I think there's a concern about what that would mean for a associate or trainee's hours if that ever occurred. And so I would just put out there that we would hope if some issue did occur about the lack of clarity, if the hours were brought into question, that the BBS would err on the side of discretion for any pre-licensee to protect them and the work they've done to gain their hours towards licensure. Thank you.